Emma never planned for the evening to feel different. It was just another quiet night in the house. The rain tapped gently on the windows, and the television hummed softly in the background. Daniel had come home from his long shift at the cafe, his shoulders tight, his expression worn. He dropped into the chair and sighed, trying to roll out the stiffness in his back. Emma, watching from the sofa, felt a tug of sympathy. She stood up and offered, almost without thinking, "Do you want me to help?" "Just a quick massage. You look exhausted." Daniel hesitated, but then nodded. He sat forward and she moved behind him. Her hands pressed against his tense shoulders. Gentle at first, then firmer as she felt the knots in his muscles. It was an innocent act, the kind of thing she had done for friends and family before. But as her hands moved in slow circles, something shifted. The room seemed quieter. The warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips felt heavier than it should have. She told herself to keep her focus on the task, but her heartbeat betrayed her, speeding up without reason. Daniel let out a soft sigh, closing his eyes. "That feels really good," he murmured. His voice was low, calm, almost vulnerable. Emma swallowed hard, forcing herself to keep her movements steady. She didn't want him to notice the tremor in her hands. She reminded herself he was her stepson, Mark's boy, the young man who had grown into adulthood under her roof. This was supposed to be nothing more than kindness. But when the silence stretched on, Emma's thoughts began to drift. She noticed the small details she had never really allowed herself to see, the way his hair curled slightly at the edges, the steadiness of his breathing, the quiet strength in his posture. She shook her head inwardly. "Stop. You're imagining things." Her hands slowed, then stopped for a moment. She stepped back, pretending to stretch her own shoulders. "That should help," she said quickly, forcing a smile. But inside she felt unsettled. Why did it feel different? Why did her chest feel tight? Daniel glanced back at her, his eyes warm, unsuspecting. "Thanks, Emma. I really needed that." His gratitude was genuine, simple, without weight. And yet his words landed heavier than she expected. She nodded, muttered something about making tea, and hurried into the kitchen, her mind spinning. The kettle whistled as she leaned against the counter, trying to steady herself. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. Daniel was part of the family, a young man she had promised to guide and protect. Her role was clear. And yet, the warmth from those few minutes lingered, refusing to fade. Later, when she lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain outside only seemed to echo the storm inside her. Mark was away on another business trip, as he often was, and the bed felt too big, too cold. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the scene. The way Daniel had closed his eyes, trusting her touch. The way the room had gone still, as if the world outside had paused for them. Emma turned on her side, pulling the blanket closer. She hated the way her heart betrayed her. She loved her husband, even if their marriage had grown quieter with time. But she could not deny the sudden flicker that had stirred tonight. It frightened her more than she wanted to admit. By morning, she convinced herself it was nothing. Just a strange moment, nothing more. She would move on, keep her distance, and never let it happen again. She busied herself with chores, determined to bury the memory. But deep down, she knew something had shifted, something she couldn't easily ignore. That single, simple act of massage meant to comfort had opened a door she was afraid to walk through, but also afraid to close completely. And though she tried to shake it off, Emma sensed that her heart had begun a dangerous journey, one she never intended to take. Emma tried to convince herself that nothing had changed, but she felt it every time Daniel walked into the room. It was in the way her chest tightened when he smiled, in the way her thoughts drifted toward him when she was alone. She hated herself for noticing, but the more she tried to push it down, the stronger it grew. Her marriage to Mark had been fragile for months. He worked late nights, came home tired, and barely looked at her. She had stopped expecting tenderness from him, and somewhere along the way, her heart had grown empty. One evening, Mark called to say he would be away for the entire week. Emma hung up the phone and sat in silence, her stomach sinking. She had grown used to his absence, but the loneliness hit harder that night. Daniel returned home not long after, dropping his bag by the door, his hair damp from the rain. He shook it off and smiled faintly. Long day, he said, slipping out of his jacket. Emma nodded and asked if he wanted dinner. They sat at the table together, just the two of them, filling the empty seats with laughter and small stories. As the evening stretched on, Emma felt the ease between them. Daniel had a way of making her laugh, a way of listening that Mark had long forgotten. When the dishes were done, they moved to the living room. An old movie was playing, something Daniel had picked. The glow of the screen lit his face, and for the first time, Emma realized she was watching him instead of the film. She shifted uncomfortably, telling herself to focus on the story. But then his hand brushed against hers when they reached for the popcorn at the same time. Her breath caught. It was such a small thing, an accident, but the air between them changed instantly. The room felt charged. Emma pulled her hand back quickly, her pulse racing. Daniel froze, his eyes flicking toward her with hesitation. "Sorry," he whispered, his voice low, uncertain. Emma shook her head, her throat dry. "No, it's fine," she said, but her tone was shaky. She looked away, but the heat in her chest refused to calm. She wanted to stand, to leave the room, but her body didn't move. The silence grew heavier, the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. For the rest of the movie, she kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the screen, though she couldn't recall a single scene. When the credits rolled, Daniel stood and stretched. He glanced at her again as though he wanted to say something but thought better of it. "I'm going to bed," he said softly. Emma nodded, forcing a smile. "Good night." When he left the room, she finally let out the breath she had been holding. She pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. This was dangerous. She could not let her loneliness twist into something that could destroy her family. But deep down, she already knew the truth. Her heart was betraying her. The next few days were harder. She noticed things she hadn't before. The way Daniel carried groceries inside without being asked. The way he carefully folded laundry. The way he asked if she had eaten when she looked tired. Little gestures that felt thoughtful. Gestures she had once hoped for from Mark. Every act of kindness made her ache more. Emma caught herself staring sometimes, then quickly looked away. She avoided being alone with him when she could, but life inside the house made it impossible to keep distance forever. The guilt weighed on her heavily, but so did the longing. She wasn't sure which hurt more. One afternoon, she stood in the kitchen while Daniel sat at the table working on his laptop. The sun streamed in through the window, painting the room in golden light. For a moment, she imagined what life would feel like if things were different. If Mark wasn't part of the picture, if the guilt wasn't there. The thought scared her, and she quickly turned back to the sink, scrubbing dishes just to keep her hands busy. But then Daniel spoke, breaking the quiet. "Emma, you've seemed different lately. Are you okay?" His tone was soft, concerned. She froze, her hands tightening on the dishcloth. She forced a laugh. "I'm fine. Just tired." Daniel nodded, though his eyes lingered on her a little longer than usual. She felt his gaze and couldn't meet it. Her heart thudded in her chest. That night, when she lay in bed alone, she admitted to herself what she had been denying. It wasn't just loneliness. It wasn't just a passing thought. She was drawn to him. And that truth, once spoken in her own mind, terrified her. She knew she could never tell anyone. She knew it could never be acted upon. But she also knew there was no turning back. The massage had been the spark, but the loneliness in her marriage was the fuel. Now the fire burned quietly inside her, unseen, but powerful enough to change everything if she wasn't careful. And Emma realized with dread that her heart had already crossed a line, even if her actions had not. Emma had tried to keep her distance, to bury the feelings she knew were wrong, but Daniel noticed the shift immediately. He was quieter around her, more cautious, and that only made her heart race faster. She felt the tension in every glance, every passing word. One evening, as she prepared dinner, Daniel came into the kitchen, leaning casually against the counter. "Emma, you've been different lately," he said, his voice low but steady. "I feel like something's on your mind. Did I do something wrong?" Emma froze for a moment, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. The question hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to dismiss it, to smile and say nothing, but the weight in her chest forced her to speak. "No, Daniel, it's not you," she whispered, almost inaudibly. Her voice shook slightly, betraying her calm facade. "It's me. I feel things I shouldn't." Daniel's brow furrowed, confusion crossing his features. "Feelings? What do you mean?" Emma swallowed hard, searching for words that would explain without revealing too much. She stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with emotion. "I care about you more than I should. I love your father, I really do. But sometimes when I'm around you, I feel something else. Something I can't explain, and it scares me." Daniel blinked, taken aback, but he didn't move away. He stayed there, listening, trying to understand. Emma's voice trembled, but she continued, desperate to be honest without crossing any lines. "I know it's wrong. I know it's not right. But pretending it isn't there doesn't make it go away." He looked down, his hands fidgeting. "Emma, I don't know what to say." His voice was soft, uncertain. "I care about you too." But I thought he stopped, unsure how to finish the thought. Emma reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I know," she said softly. "You don't have to say anything. You don't need to feel the same. I couldn't keep it bottled up anymore. It was eating at me." They stood in silence, the kitchen lights casting shadows on their faces. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Daniel finally lifted his eyes to hers, and she saw something in him: concern, understanding, and maybe a flicker of the same conflicted feeling she carried. "I don't want this to ruin anything," Emma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't act on it. I won't act on it. But I needed you to know what's in my heart, even if it's messy and confusing." Daniel nodded slowly, still processing her words. "I appreciate you telling me," he said finally. "I care about you too, Emma, and I don't want anything to go wrong between us. But I understand. I understand completely." The honesty between them hung in the air, heavy and raw. Emma felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the truth was out, and sadness because it confirmed the boundaries they could never cross. She could see in Daniel's eyes the same inner struggle she felt, the tug of emotions that were strong but had to be restrained. For the next few days, the atmosphere in the house was different. There was a quiet tension, an unspoken acknowledgement of what had been admitted. Emma tried to focus on her daily routine, on her work, on the small tasks that filled the house. But every time she caught Daniel looking her way, or heard his laugh echo from another room, she felt a pang of longing she could not ignore. One evening, she found herself in the living room again, just sitting quietly. Daniel joined her, carrying a book he had been reading. They sat side by side, close enough that she could feel the warmth from his shoulder. Neither spoke at first. Then, slowly, Daniel broke the silence. "Emma, I know we can't change anything, but I want you to know something." She turned to look at him, her heart pounding. "What is it?" "I respect you," he said simply. "I respect your choices, your heart, and your life. And I'll do whatever it takes to make sure nothing we feel causes pain." His words were steady, sincere, and it hit her how much he truly cared, not in a romantic or forbidden way, but in a way that honored her and the family. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. She wanted to reach out, to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay, but she knew she had to keep her distance. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you, Daniel. That means more than I can say." That night, Emma lay in bed, reflecting on the conversation. It had been difficult, terrifying even, to confess her feelings in any way. Yet the act of admitting them had lifted some of the weight from her chest. She knew it didn't change anything in reality, but it allowed her to see clearly the path she had to take. She could acknowledge the feelings, but she could not act on them. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Daniel navigated their home with this new understanding. The tension never fully disappeared, but it softened. They found comfort in their closeness without crossing boundaries, sharing moments of laughter, conversation, and quiet companionship. Emma focused on rebuilding her connection with Mark when he was home, understanding that the emptiness in her heart was partly due to neglect in her marriage, not just her own feelings. Daniel, for his part, respected the limits they had set. He continued to show care and thoughtfulness, but he maintained the boundaries Emma needed. The house felt calmer, safer, and somehow more honest. Both of them carried the memory of their emotions, but they had learned restraint, the power of honesty, and the importance of protecting the relationships that mattered most. Emma realized that sometimes love was not about giving in to desire. Sometimes it was about understanding the heart, acknowledging what it felt, and making the difficult choice to keep boundaries intact. She felt grateful that Daniel had listened, that he had cared, and that she had been brave enough to speak her truth. In the quiet of the night, Emma whispered to herself, "I'll never forget this feeling, but I won't let it define me." She understood now that true strength came from facing emotions honestly and choosing what was right, even when it was painful. And as she drifted off to sleep, she felt a small measure of peace. Knowing she had done the hardest part, spoken the truth, and kept her family intact. The storm inside her heart had not disappeared, but it had been tamed for now. And in that calm, she began to see a future where love, respect, and honesty could guide her through even the most complicated emotions. Emma stared at her reflection in the mirror, her hands gripping the sink as if it could anchor her racing thoughts. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that forced every emotion to echo loudly in her mind. After confessing her feelings to Daniel, the tension between them had eased, but her heart still felt tangled. She knew she had done the right thing, spoken the truth, and respected boundaries. But the longing, the warmth she had felt, did not disappear overnight. She sighed and pressed her palms to her face, trying to make sense of the storm inside her. Mark was away again, and Emma felt the familiar pang of loneliness creep in. She thought about their marriage, about the distance that had grown over the years. She loved him truly, but there was a quiet sadness that had settled between them, one that had left her heart searching for connection elsewhere. Daniel had become a part of her life in a way that filled some of that emptiness. Not romantically, but through companionship and care. She had to remind herself that those feelings, while intense, were not meant to cross the line. The next morning, she moved through her day with mechanical precision. Breakfast, chores, errands, everything was done, but her mind was elsewhere. She noticed every detail about Daniel, the way he laughed when something on the TV made him smile, the care he took folding laundry, the quiet patience he showed when she asked for help. Each observation made her heart ache and strengthened the resolve she knew she had to keep. The emotions were real, yes, but the choices mattered more. That evening, she found Daniel sitting at the table, reading a book. The soft glow of the lamp made the room feel warm and intimate. Emma hesitated for a moment, then walked over and placed a cup of tea in front of him. He looked up and smiled gently, and for a brief second, she caught herself imagining a life where things were simpler. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. It was dangerous, and she couldn't allow herself to drift into fantasies. "Thank you," Daniel said softly. "You didn't have to." Emma shrugged lightly, trying to mask the flutter of emotion she felt at his gratitude. "I wanted to," she said. "It's been a long day, and you deserve a little comfort." She realized how careful she had to be with her words, ensuring they conveyed kindness without hinting at anything more. They sat together in quiet companionship for a while, the kind of silence that wasn't awkward but comforting. Emma noticed the way he adjusted his position, how his eyes occasionally flicked toward her, curious and observant. Her heart reacted instinctively, and she closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on steadying her breathing. She reminded herself, admiration, respect, care, those were safe emotions. Anything beyond that could unravel everything. As the week went on, Emma focused on rebuilding her marriage, on trying to fill the gaps that had formed over time. She made an effort to call Mark more often, to check in, to express small moments of gratitude. Yet, she knew deep inside that some part of her heart would always remember the closeness she had shared with Daniel. The quiet intensity of their bond. It was a memory, a lesson in restraint, a reminder of how emotions could be powerful and fleeting at the same time.